Welcome to the Stop Over Drinking and Start Living podcast, where high-achieving, goal-oriented rebel women come to learn how to live a vibrant and fulfilling life without requiring alcohol to get through it. No labels, no judgments, no saying you'll never drink again. Just real proven methods to help you stop rebelling against yourself with alcohol so you can drink less and do more. I'm your host, Angela Mascenik. Let's dig in. Welcome to episode 280, Mental Health Month with Kim Jeffs, Executive and Somatic Coach and Licensed Clinical Mental Health Counseling Supervisor. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm super excited about a conversation that I had with Kim Jeffs. Kim Jeffs is a licensed clinical mental health counseling supervisor and founder and executive and somatic coach of Soma Soul. And Kim is actually in my local community, and I met Kim through various, online avenues, and I've come to know her very well and have partnered with her for some in-person workshop and events, including RISE, the Women's Leadership Summit here in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Kim is a licensed mental health counseling supervisor in the state of North Carolina. Additionally, she's a certified somatic experiencing practitioner focusing on high stress physiology. And over the course of 2 decades, she's explored the connection between the mind and body, obtaining various certifications that enrich her practice. This continuous learning has allowed her to help individuals tap into their potential both professionally and personally. She says that despite her professional journey, it's essential for you to remember that she's a human like everybody else, and she understands life's challenges and the importance of connection. And she believes that we navigate life more effectively when we're connected and supportive of one another. And this philosophy drives her, ensuring that Soma Soul isn't just a business, but a place of genuine support and transformation. I hope that you enjoy Kim and I's conversation, and I have linked up all of the ways to connect with Kim in the show notes. I hope you enjoy. Hey, Kim, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Great to see you.
You too. So, listeners, we have Kim Jeffs here. I'm going to let Kim introduce herself along with you got the little intro before we jumped into this amazing discussion. So, Kim, I'll let you kind of give a little summary of who you are and what you do.
Great. Yeah. Well, who am I? That's a question to answer.
Yes.
But, for work, I'm a mental health clinician by training. I've been in the field of mental health for around 20 years. And my background in training is in something called somatic psychology. And maybe 4.5 years ago, about 2 weeks before COVID hit, I left the traditional field of mental health and moved into the field of leadership, working with mission-driven companies and women entrepreneurs, high-performing women in the C-suite arenas to help them with their stress and burnout that they were having during especially the COVID era. And that has continued. So I'm more in the leadership field now, working with women and fostering systemic change. Nice. And so that's who I am professionally. Mm-hmm. And then personally, I'm a mom, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend. And I live in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where I call home. So yeah, avid tennis lover. What else can I tell you?
Well, you also lead retreats, don't you?
Yes, we have that in common, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah, so I lead international women's retreats, and I just got back from a retreat in Peru. So cool. And it was a resiliency retreat. We did the Machu Picchu trek, and it caused us to really focus on our resiliency, mind, body, spirit. But it was an amazing experience. So yeah, I tried to run international retreats. I met my husband years ago at Kripalu, which is a big yoga and self-growth international retreat center. So I've had this whole retreat thread in my work for many years now, and I love it. It's soul work when you get a group of women without any distractions in a foreign country to focus on their self and spiritual growth.
Yeah.
It's a really profound experience. So yeah, my work's looked like a lot of different things over the years, but it's all in the realm of mental health and well-being, wellness, women, leadership. Yeah.
Love it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yes. That's why I wanted to have a couple mental health professionals come on, different than what I do. I mean, we share a lot of similarities, but you have definitely had that more in-depth background, before what you're doing now. So I wanted to have you come on and talk about specifically what you kind of talk about mostly is the somatic experience, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you define what that even means?
Yeah, so somatic means body, so it's a body-oriented therapy. And so we're tracking, by the way, the mind and the body are connected through the neck.
Yes.
Traditional mental health, taught people to manage their thoughts.
Yes.
And traditionally, especially 20 years ago, even when I started in the field, mental health was separate than physical health.
Yep.
And through, evolution, science, neuroscience, right, we're really understanding more the interconnection between the brain, the mind-body connection. So our thoughts affect our physiology, and the way our physiology works affects our thoughts. So I've spent a lot of time studying the mind-body connection and neuroscience and something called the vagus nerve, which runs all of our automatic processes in the body, breathing, digestion, things like that. And so, somatic psychology is one field, one niche in the mental health field. I think there's something like 280 different types of mental health treatment a therapist could be trained in.
Yeah.
And most people looking for mental health therapy are not aware of the different types of training a therapist could have.
Yeah.
So similar to medicine, you wouldn't go see an oncologist for the flu.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love having this conversation because it helps people find the right provider for their needs.
Yes.
Typically, somatic therapists specialize in working with high stress physiology and trauma physiology. Because trauma is stored in the back brain, and you have to understand how to work with that back brain and the somatics, the body sensations, to be able to heal trauma.
Yeah. How would you know if you had that issue, and how would you know that you needed somatic therapeutic work?
Yeah. Well, the more your body, right, is in self-regulation or co-regulation, typically your symptoms of mental distress or physical distress are going to go down. So people typically enter somatic work if they have very clear symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, if there's difficulty with sleeping, with digestion, eating. I know you do work with addiction, right? So the addiction work in the somatic field is just another way that people are trying to self-regulate through the use of substances. But what are you regulating, right? So if there's really distressing sensations in your body, rapid breathing, chest gripping, panic attack like symptoms, depression, rumination, fearful thoughts or repetitive compulsive thoughts, things like that. So that's more PTSD, maybe high anxiety. I've also have a big history of working with people with a lot of medical conditions, medical, whether that be medical trauma from, surgeries gone bad or things like that. Or digestive issues. So we're really understanding how the brain is involved in gut health and things like that now. So I've seen people with a lot of autoimmune conditions, digestive disorders, IBS, Crohn's disease, things like that. So it can treat a lot of issues. So if the mind, if we can't change our thoughts because our sensations are just running our physiology, in the back brain, that might be an indication that somatic work could help.
So if you've been trying some other things, if you've been trying traditional more talk therapy or mental health work or changing the way you're thinking, the cognitive stuff, if that
Right.
isn't working and you recognize you have some of these other symptoms, then you might consider the somatic stuff.
Yeah, and I love traditional talk therapy. While I'm
Mm-hmm.
not trained in it, I've,
Mm-hmm.
done it as a client. Here's maybe how I would distinguish traditional talk therapy, which is and somatic work, which is
Mm-hmm.
traditional talk therapy develops a lot of insight as to why we are the way we are. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why are we over drinking?
Right.
Maybe,
Yeah.
right? Or what did happen in childhood that maybe was, created adverse experiences for us or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it develops insight, but it doesn't work with the physiology of the body.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't shift what's happening in the autonomic nervous
Mm-hmm.
system, our
Mm-hmm.
breath, our digestion,
Mm-hmm.
things like that, our sleep patterns. So
Mm-hmm.
I call somatic work the now what therapy.
Yeah.
Typically, people have tried a lot of therapies. It's not typically the first place people start, although now with more and more education around what somatic work is, people are asking for that right away. But typically, people have insight as to why they are the way they are, why they're struggling the way they are in their bodies or in relationship to others. And then they're really looking for a way to shift that back brain, shift the sensations in their body, sleep better, digest their food better, decrease their burnout, their stress, have more pleasure and reciprocity in relationship. Somatic work is relational too. Because if we can, co-regulate and self-regulate, then we can be healthier in relationship to other people.
Yeah, it gives us more empathy for other people and their feelings, right? Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for kind of diving into that a little bit because I think, I'm just kind of learning what that means. In some of the work that I do, we definitely work a lot on processing our feelings and getting comfortable in our body with those sensations. But it's not the deeper traumatic, PTSD type stuff that you're talking about. Like I'm helping people identify themselves, how they feel, and then understanding the different sensations and not judging them, right? And just breathe, like learning how to process and breathe through that and interrupting their automatic behavior. But tell me like what you do in a somatic session. Like what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, first, I guess just to comment on what you were saying, and this might be part of the process of where I would start with a client, but sensations are a precursor to emotions. And then emotions, after emotion comes behavior. So if we're looking to change our behaviors, a lot of talk therapists or coaches, we explore the emotions, but really what drives emotion is sensation. So that's the deeper level of conversation that we need to be having in order to shift maybe how much we're drinking or how we're participating in our work life or with our families and things like that. The question was, how do I begin working with clients?
Yeah, like what does it look like? So say somebody is struggling with a behavior that they don't like, right? Like over drinking, overeating, overworking, something like that. Like what would it look like for them to do some more somatic therapeutic stuff?
Yeah, so the biggest thing we start with, typically is education a little bit. I don't know about you, but I didn't learn how to speak the language of the body. My family wasn't like, tell me about your sensations.
Right.
Right? My kids are learning that because they have two therapists as parents, right?
Yeah.
So, and it can feel like a foreign language. So I do go over kind of what sensations are. Some people don't even have the language to express it. They have sensation, but they don't even know how to communicate about them. So we start with a little psychoeducation, and then we go through a process of something called tracking. So the client will sit with their sensations. They might bring up the dynamic of, working too much, right? And we work with the autonomic nervous system as a therapist, or now I'm in the coaching world. So I'm tracking as the client is talking. I'm catching a lot of the content and the information, but I'm tracking shifts in their autonomic nervous system. So I'm tracking energetic shifts. I'm tracking facial movements, eye movements, pupil dilation, mouth movements. And then we're working with the reported felt sense of the client. So as they're kind of talking or scanning their body is, I might say, what are you noticing? And they might say, actually, I'm getting really anxious right now. So we might then slow down the conversation and tune into the sensation of the body and see where that anxiety wants to go. The idea is that the body has the innate wisdom to heal, and it knows how to do that. We just got to stop trying to manage it. Like we have grief and loss, and then we stuff that in a our body box here, and then we continue with work the next day or whatever. And if we give the body time and space, most often it knows how to move through this physiological sequence to go from distress to flow. So the client's talking about their reported felt sense, because they're talking about their work dynamic or their marital issue or whatever that might, their business stress, something like that. And then I am tracking the autonomic nervous system, and I'm asking questions that would bring the body from distress to a place of flow, or what they call physiological coherence. And that's where we have, low stress, pleasure, sensations in our body, reciprocity in relationship, positive, eye contact, emotional, and vocal tone, positive emotional experiences, and vocal tone of safety and connection.
So the session, and I'm just kind of learning as you're talking about it here. So that in this session, you're giving them an opportunity to be with those sensations and let them be heard and seen and felt. And so the idea is that if you do that, then you aren't storing it in your body. Right? And you're able to move through it and then get back to more of a homeostasis mentally. Okay.
In the somatic world, we call it coherent. So if you think of this metaphor might help. But if you think of, driving a car and coming across a deer, have you ever had a deer across the road, right?
Or
and what happens?
Or something, yeah,
it's scary, right? So you seize up, you might grab the steering wheel, you hit the brakes, the deer seizes up, their eyes widen, their pupils dilate, they freeze, their body stiffens, their heart rate increases, and then the car stops, and then they orient, they move their head, and they orient to where they're going to run to. So they go from a state of freeze, maybe flow, I'm just eating grass and now I'm walking across the road, now I'm frozen. Then they run, right? They run somewhere. So that's the flight response. So we go from freeze to flight. And then eventually it finds a spot, it orients to safety. And it goes through a whole physiological sequence. It could happen really quick of shaking in the nervous system. And it reorients to safety and eats grass and maybe lays down and takes
it moves on whatever. With it.
It doesn't incessantly think like, I'm never going in that road again. That's really scary. I don't know. My mother's in that road. I don't know. Whatever. All the loops go through. It doesn't do that. So our bodies, we're just mammals, and our bodies know how to go through this sequence. Where we get stuck is we have these big, brains here that talk us in and out of feelings and sensations and emotions. And then we have a culture that keeps us really busy, right? And so then all these, sensations and emotions are bubbling up.
And when they bubble up, they cause problems, right? So we look to solve those problems in other ways that may not be helpful because we've got all this stored energy basically and feelings in our body, right?
Yes, exactly. And then that's where the overworking, the overeating, the overdrinking, all the over issues,
shopping. So there's a big benefit to allowing space for yourself to work through that and processing that, so you're not carrying that with you. And then it's like bubbling up in other areas in your life that you may not even be making the connection to, right?
Right. Yeah, personally, I think the difference between when I love my life and when I hate my life is space. I really think it's that simple for me, personally. I'm curious what you or, your listeners think, but I think we're really motion sick as a society, as a culture, we're moving really, really fast.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're not really awake. So I was witnessing somebody this morning. I was out walking in the woods, and came out to like this little road where there's some houses, and I was just by myself. I didn't have my dogs or anything, and I wasn't listening to anything. And I was just like, I'm really enjoying this time right now with cicadas and like just the weather shifts and like this warm breeze on my skin. Like I'm like fully in the moment, right? And like
Mm-hmm.
experiencing my in the moment aliveness, which so many people don't, which is another thing. But I see
Right.
this woman shuffling in front of me, and she's wearing flip flops. She's holding a cup of coffee and her dog, and she's on her phone. And I'm just like witnessing her not being in the present moment, right? She's so like we're asleep, but we look like we're doing all of these other things, right? But we're not here in our bodies in this present moment.
Right.
And part of my work, and as you know this, is like helping people get into their aliveness, right? Get into the full amazingness of being a human and
Mm-hmm.
being in those present moments. So it just reminded me of what you're saying is like the time, right?
Yeah.
We need time unconnected from things, right?
Yes, yes. And I love you're saying it differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's beautiful what you're
Mhm.
saying.
Mhm.
Um, Trauma. So we can think of there's lots of different types of trauma. We
Mhm.
have personal traumas, but we also have the collective traumas of society and cultures and things
Yeah.
like that. But trauma keeps us out of the present moment.
Mm.
Mhm. So the goal, hopefully, is to bring people more into connection.
Yeah.
That's my work,
Yeah.
into the present moment, and have the brain be able to orient to cues of safety or danger.
Yes.
Hopefully, usually our present moment is pretty safe. I mean,
Mhm.
unless you're in some life-threatening situation,
Right.
that should be very time limited.
Yeah.
But in the present moment, you're able to, because of your aliveness practice, right?
Mhm.
And your present moment practice, tap into safety and connection
Mhm.
and pleasure. And guess what? From
Mhm.
there, we make better relational decisions,
Yes.
better decisions around our, health, what we're going to eat, put
Yep.
in our body,
Yep.
what does our body need? We make better business decisions.
Yeah.
This is where I come in now with the executive coaching.
Yes.
Entrepreneurs, like people can make better business decisions when they're in the present moment
Yeah.
and dealing with, they're really oriented to reality now,
Yeah.
not what the future is, not what the past was,
Yes.
but what's
Yeah.
happening now.
Yeah, it's so a lot of the struggles that my clients have is that they've never been taught anything that we're talking about, right? Like that's not
Right.
common language in our society. It's getting better, right? There's more
Right.
openness and more education around mental health and feelings and this stuff, right? Which is great. And when people stop over drinking or they're taking a break from numbing themselves on a regular basis, they don't know how to be with themselves, and
Yeah.
they don't know how they feel, and they don't know, like they feel like they're intolerable in their own skin, right?
Yes.
And so it's hard for them sometimes to be willing to tap into that present moment and just like not schedule themselves. Like a lot of times people say they just have to keep busy in the evening when they're not drinking because they can't go there. They can't go feel their desires for the alcohol. They can't feel their boredom. They can't feel the stress from the day because it's too much. They just,
Right.
it's like they can't access that sometimes. And so I'm
Mhm.
wondering if you have any tips for them if they're doing this work and they're trying to feel their feelings. Like, what would you say to somebody that's just kind of like going there or wants to go there and stop numbing and be with themselves more? Maybe they
Yes.
don't have a
Yeah.
somatic therapist that they can call up or go get a session with. Like, what would you say to
Yeah.
them?
I mean, and here's first where I'll start, which is I am them.
Yes.
This is a practice,
Yes.
right? And I say that because I want to demystify
Yeah.
mental health,
Right, right.
and addiction as like stigmas. I
Mhm.
mean, I struggle, and I'm a therapist. I'm married to a therapist. Okay,
Mhm.
I have all the skills and the degrees to be. I'm a trained parent,
Yeah.
and I'm trained to be in a partnership, and it's so hard.
It is hard.
Life is beautiful, but life is hard. Um, So I just want to acknowledge that. And then the first step that I would say for, any person out there is when you try to, or if there's a coach or, a therapist listening to this, is to try to access body sensations through what we might call the blue zone, which is sensations of pleasure, safety, connection, reciprocity, and relationship. So I've trained a lot of therapists, I've trained a lot of coaches, and when they start to do trauma work or access sensations, they'll ask clients, people will ask themselves, like, what is this intolerable sensation? But where in the body might there be space? Or might there be breath? What might be pleasurable? If you look around your environment, if I look around my office right now, I see a picture of my kids hugging. As I make contact with that image, what happens in my body? Right? So starting to access sensation through this blue zone, or this zone of pleasure, safety, connection, reciprocity, I think is key to healing trauma. By the way, we want to feel that most of the time anyways. As opposed to the red zone, or the trauma physiology, which is, short of breath, fear, danger, tightness in the chest, constriction in the legs, what I can't have, right? Whatever that might be.
Right. So to track towards something that they find good. So they see that something is good and feel that.
Right. Yeah. That's people's problem, by the way, right? Who are struggling with mental health, physical health. If you're in chronic pain, there's typically one area in the body, right? Or a couple areas in the body that are in pain. There are also areas in the body that are not.
Yeah.
You'd focus on those areas. Tell me about those.
Yeah.
Or, if you're just with yourself, you can journal about those. So if I have, I've had a lot of back problems earlier, maybe 10 years ago. So I've been in chronic pain before for years, but that was like located in my back, right? But how are my feet feeling?
Yeah.
Or my limbs, my hands, my arms. There were places, and the more I can orient to the places in my body that were not in pain, the pain would decrease.
Yeah.
The brain naturally goes to threat, to protection, right? So that I'm not in danger again or anymore.
Yeah, I've used that when I've been training for a long distance race, and like after mile 12 or something like that, my knees are achy, right? Or my hips are really stiff. And so I'm like, okay, what doesn't hurt? My hands don't hurt, my arms don't hurt, my face doesn't hurt. And like when I'm focusing on that, sure, I still have the sensations in my knees, but it's not as intense because I'm not focusing on it as much.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. So I even think I've heard you speak in this way when it comes to the addiction work. It's like, well, what can you have? What do you have access to?
Yes.
You're just talking about being in the woods. It's like you can feel the temperature outside, the cool breeze, the sound, all of your sensations are being accessed, right? To bring you into that present moment.
Yeah.
And it sounds like they were pleasurable to you.
Yeah.
So the more we practice that, expand our capacity, right, to feel good in our bodies and in relationship to each other, the planet, our purpose, our jobs, things like that.
Yeah, I love that. And then once they get
You're somatic. You're somatic, and you know.
Yeah. I mean, I talk about you've got to feel it in your body all the time, right? I don't have these advanced terminologies like you do, but it's like, yeah, you gotta get out of your mind and you gotta get into your body. I say that all the time. Like this is what I have my clients visualize. It's like you're a Lego. You pop off your head, you put it to the side table, and you get into your body.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So like I'm using, very similar thought, like ideas, right?
Yeah.
Just different. But what I do is I make them go to the pain source, right? So like if they're having an urge, I'm like, describe that urge in your body. What does that urge feel like? But I think if that's too much for them to start, I could be like, okay, if that's too much and that feels inaccessible to you, focus on something in that present moment that doesn't hurt, that doesn't feel bad. And you're still being in the present moment. It's just a different point of focus. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, that's one technique. It's kind of exposure there under the realm of exposure therapy. Do what you don't like and then get over. expose yourself so much that it loses its energetic
Mm-hmm.
charge.
Mm-hmm.
That might work for some people.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's so pressing, like typically we can feel these impulses that are stressing us out, right?
Yes.
Or the pain that's in the body. We have a lot of access to that.
Yeah.
Right. But I think, what do I think? I think there's a couple terms that we can name, but one of which is capacity building, right?
Yeah.
So what do we want to build our capacity for? So whatever we put our attention on will grow. So we want to build our capacity for the blue zone. We spend more time there.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, most people are really good at feeling like crap.
Yeah. Right.
Right?
Yes.
And so we might enter a sensation through there. If that worked for somebody, great. But if people don't have, if people want to lower their capacity to feel bad or be in pain or unhealthy in relationships, then we'd focus more on the blue zone.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that idea of the blue zone. When I'm teaching this, it sounds like what I have them add pleasure into their day. So like during the day, we're looking to feel good, right? So that you build your capacity for that and you are experiencing more pleasure throughout the day. So then you're not looking to escape the negative stuff at the end of the day.
Yes.
And then like building in your aliveness, like what made you feel alive today? And it's just usually the little things like listening to the birds or noticing the leaves flickering in the sunlight or like bringing that in because that's pleasurable and that makes you feel good. Just different ways of looking at it.
Yeah.
Okay. So what for Mental Health Month in this work? What, like, if we kind of talked about this at the beginning, but if there's signs that people might have that maybe they're moving along and they're not feeling great or they've tried other things, like what are some clear signs that you could talk about to the people listening?
That people are experiencing mental health symptoms, do you mean? Yeah, well, I mean, most people are. I think there's research, especially women. I think 89% of women in the last month have experienced symptoms of burnout, for example. That's high. That's like most of us. Low. Beyond the pandemic, we're in a mental health epidemic and an addiction epidemic, as you already know. I'm preaching to the choir. But excessive worrying, excessive drinking, all the overs you mentioned, overeating, right? Oversleeping, lack of sleep, digestive issues, tearfulness, short temper, fear, in terms of that's like some of the emotions and sensations. But if the thoughts patterns are fearful, as opposed to safe and connected, pay attention to the scripts that's happening. If you daydream or you go for a walk in the woods, can you be in the present moment or are you dissociated? How are your relationships doing? That would be a question. Like, how are your friendships? How's your partnership or your relationship with your spouse? How's your relationship with your kids going? Is there reciprocity in these relationships? Or do I feel stuck? Your relationship to work, does it feel, balanced, or am I spending, does it feel off balance? I'm dedicating 80 hours a week. I hear this all the time. I don't get out of my pajamas all day. I've like just sat at the computer all day. I don't know why we're doing this to ourselves. But I mean, I go kind of to the core. Are we eating? Are we sleeping? Are we, drinking water? Right. And then how are our relationships? And then we're going to look for, excessive emotion, especially if it doesn't fit the scenario. If it feels,
I use the example of one time it was during the pandemic, in the early pandemic, I couldn't find socks. And it just sent me on the bed crying. Like that would be a sign that things aren't like the emotion, the response didn't match what the issue is.
Yes.
It wasn't about the socks, right? It was about something other than the socks.
Right.
But it made me feel like I was out of control, like just losing control on everything. So that would be a sign, I think.
Right, definitely. And then I'm having physical health issues. I don't know anybody who's physically not okay, but mentally great.
Yeah.
So again, this is all connected.
Right.
Are we struggling with autoimmune? Are we, how are we feeling in our bodies?
Yes.
And then the other piece I'll put a plug in for is how are we feeling in our spirit?
Yeah.
When I went to this recent retreat in Peru, I don't speak too much Spanish, but I overheard a conversation. We were with like a local guide, and then there was another local guide, and they came in contact with each other. We were touring, the town with some ruins in it. But this one man said to the other man, he said, "How's your spirit doing?" That was how they greeted each other.
That's so
and I thought,
beautiful.
How would our society be different if we greeted each other in that way?
Yeah.
We'd be different.
Absolutely.
So how are you doing spiritually? And that's, a broad term,
Yeah.
But are you connected to your purpose, your mission, your relationships, how you want to be on this planet in this lifetime? You're doing okay with that. And that can look like a lot of different things based on what, religious paradigm you're coming from. But I think we need to be connected to who we are and our purpose. And we do better mentally and physically when we do that.
Yeah, and that's part of knowing yourself, right? Like knowing who you are and getting to know yourself through some of this work. Like, over my journey, the past 6 years or so, it's like I'm constantly learning things about myself, and it's fascinating to me. I know, and now I feel like I know myself really well. I know what I like. I know what I don't like. I know what feels good in my body. Like like talking about the somatics is like how I meter decisions, or if I want to do something or if I don't, I check in with my body. Like that feels good or it feels, and knowing how to figure that out is something that I think you can always trust. Once you figure out how to do that, you can always trust what that has to say.
Yes, absolutely. And then that's where we figure out too, what our boundaries are and how to protect our needs. Yeah, but it comes from a sensation first. That kind of like closing in or clenching, like, I don't know. That means there's a boundary coming up.
Yeah.
So then we can ask ourselves, like, what are the conditions for me to be successful in this dynamic, in this relationship? But if you're not paying attention to that clenching or the, I don't know, or the, tightness in the chest or something like that, then you're constantly overriding your needs and your boundaries.
Yes. Yeah, and that doesn't feel good, right, in your body. And then we get into, like, it just keeps getting kicked down the road, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where the resentment comes in and the burnout and the overwhelm and more anxiety. And then we're looking to things to fix that, right? But we don't really address what's underneath it all, and it's that we're doing too much. We need to learn how to say no.
We don't know who we are. I mean, I think that's beautiful that you help people figure out who they are. There's a challenge I give clients sometimes when they're in the boat. Some people have a really strong sense of self, actually. That's great. And when I give them the same exercise I'm about to tell you, they blow it out of the water. But with people who struggle with who they are, I ask them to identify their needs. And I have them come up with at least 100 needs, 100 to 200. And I have them identify their basic needs, their spiritual needs, their emotional needs, their community needs. Did I say spiritual? What else? Yeah, physical, spiritual, emotional, community, sexual. That's fun too. Yeah. So what are your sexual needs? And when I give people that exercise who don't have a really good sense of self, they come back the next week with 2 needs. 5 needs, 10 needs. Push. And if somebody has a really great sense of self, they come back, I give them the exercise. I say, come back with 100. They come back with 500.
Yeah.
So that might be something,
a good way to meter.
Yeah. So somebody could do that on their own. That's free. It takes no, it just takes time with yourself, but start identifying your needs.
Yeah. That's really good. I have a similar exercise, but it's 25 things that you love about yourself. And most people struggle to do that, and it takes them a while to get that assignment done. but sometimes they can't even think of one or two.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, I
So sad.
know. But it's like it's not that unusual,
Yeah.
because they're used to judging themselves so much. They're not meeting the marks in so many other, like, in their own mind, in their life, with their habits, with their behaviors, all of that. It's hard for them to see that that's not who they are, right? That
Mhm.
that's just kind of what they're doing or not doing, but who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and even if it's hard, then that's where the work is,
That's
you
right.
know?
Then we
That,
got to work on that so that can be expanded, right?
yeah, and that's, just to go back to what we were saying, that's more blue zone
Mhm.
conversations.
Mhm.
What do you love about yourself?
Yeah.
And then as you describe that, what happens in the body
Mhm.
when you locate that one thing,
Mhm.
right? And you can use sensation, you can use emotion, you can use imagery,
Mhm.
you can see how it shifts. If there's movement that wants to happen
Mhm.
inside or, outside with movement of the body.
Mhm.
Yeah, so there's lots of ways to integrate that
Yeah.
somatically.
Yeah. Great. Anything else you want to add around mental health awareness and somatics or getting to know yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that I'll add is that, I'm glad we're having this conversation. I've seen the field of mental health shift
Mhm.
over the last 20 years. It's becoming a more accessible conversation.
Mhm.
We're having to address it now in the workplace.
Mhm.
These conversations, work-life balance was not a conversation we were having 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So, businesses are having to address the mental health of their employees and the companies. So I just hope that this conversation further destigmatizes, mental health, because
Mhm.
we all struggle with, symptoms from time to time, and how to balance our mental and physical and spiritual health and
Mhm.
well-being at home and in the workplace. So I hope the conversation, just keeps continuing after this, after our conversation, and it
Yes.
inspires people to talk in their communities, because that's the only way we're going to demystify, mental health, and change the conversation more to mental, like, wellness. But there's no problem with struggling, and we don't have to, not talk about certain things.
Absolutely. No, there's so much shame around it. I think people think they shouldn't, especially with people like us who on the outside look good. We've got our shit together. We are running businesses, raising families. You see a picture on Facebook and you're like, they have it all, right? There's no problems with them. We can tend to struggle because we think that we shouldn't be upset. We shouldn't feel this way because everything is good. I've got money, good relationships, my kids are healthy. I shouldn't feel bad, right?
Right.
And so we judge that and we keep that hidden within ourselves. And
Mm,
it's just so important that if you feel anything, right, that you feels off, if you identify with anything we've talked about today that's not feeling like it's in alignment, right?
yeah,
It's important to talk about it or to talk to somebody about it, right? And to share it. There's nothing to be ashamed
absolutely.
about.
No, no, no. That's so old school. That's so
Yeah,
yesterday.
so
Mental health is
yesterday.
the new black. you know?
Yeah, yeah.
The other thing I'll say, just having come back, I've done some traveling in Asia and then Peru,
Mhm.
recently, but there's a big concept around collective care
Mhm.
from other countries. So I'd like to, just share a little
Yeah,
story, if that's okay. But
absolutely.
when I did a big trek in Nepal, and I went to the birthplace of the Buddha. And I think I told you
Yeah,
this,
yeah, yeah.
and I did with the Buddhist monks. It was this really profound experience. I was also so sick. I mean, I had food poisoning. I was, on my last limb. But as I was conversing with the guides on the trip, I was noticing, having been in the country for 2 weeks, I didn't notice any anxiety.
Mhm.
So I'm doing mental health small talk with some of the guides.
Mhm.
And I'm like, does anybody here have anxiety? And they were like, no, not at all. Maybe some of the business people and the high rises,
Mhm.
maybe, and they laughed. And I said, how about depression? Anybody get suicidal here? And they were like, no, not at
Mhm.
all. They said, when somebody's hurting, we stop everything and we surround them.
Mhm. So beautiful.
And how beautiful if we can move as an American culture to a model like that.
Yes.
Right? We're so advanced and progressed in so many ways, and the mental health and addiction in this country is rampant. But if we start focusing on how we can pause and bring people in who are suffering, as opposed to label them and ostracize them and stuff ourselves down, our sensations and emotions down, I think this conversation would shift.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. I absolutely agree. I've been very vocal recently about coming out, right? Coming out of the closet, not being anonymous, like that whole idea, like we have to hide who we are. Like, I love AA. That's helped so many people, know people that used it. Like, it's great for a lot of things, but it does feed into this thing that we have to keep ourselves hidden. And I'm such on a mission to you shouldn't be embarrassed about this. You shouldn't feel shame about it. If you do, it's okay. And we want to change that culture. So thank you for sharing that, for sure.
Yeah. And thank you for, coming out and sharing your experience too. I've seen you in community do that, share your story.
Yeah.
And then, the next thing I see happen is other people open up and share theirs.
I know.
I've seen it a few times now with you.
Yes.
And, so hopefully we all can do that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kim. This was amazing. How can people find you, like on the socials and all the things?
I'm on all the socials. Oh my goodness. That's another place, I need to set some better boundaries on for myself a little bit. All these socials can take a lot of time, but I'm on all the socials. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook.
Okay.
And my website is thesomaandsoul.com.
Awesome. Yeah.
So follow along and,
I will link all that up in the show notes for everybody to go follow you and reach out to you if they want to work on things too.
Great. And I know, we have some partnerships coming up too.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that we do, because I think this is, the mental health space, the coaching, executive coaching business, healthy living, being alcohol free or reducing our alcohol consumption. It's all a part of raising our vibration, especially as women.
Yes.
Right. So that we can come do our purpose.
Yeah. And support each other, right?
Support each other while we're doing it.
Yeah. So good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Well, that was an amazing discussion. Thank you so much again, Kim, for coming on the podcast and sharing your understanding around somatics and experience and some helpful tips. Like I said in the intro, Kim can be found by visiting her on the socials. I've linked up all of them in the show notes, or you can go to www.thesomaandsoul.com. We'll talk to y'all next week. Bye for now. I want you to check out angelamascenik.com/aliveaf. You know what it's like to have a desire to cut back on your drinking, right? You start to read books, listen to podcasts, try things, but you might not be able to yet put all the pieces and suggestions together in a way that actually makes sense and works for you. You might struggle with beating yourself up after an overdrink. You might get frustrated with yourself when you take 2 steps forward and then another 2 steps back, and get overwhelmed with what's right and wrong about your relationship with alcohol. Your friends tell you that you should be able to have just 1 drink, and it isn't a big deal. You might be white-knuckling through urges and resisting instead of peacefully processing them. And you might struggle with your identity as someone who has enjoyed having a lot of wine or alcohol in your life. It's around you all of the time. It's what you do and who you are. Well, after 5 years of successfully coaching hundreds of women through these struggles, I have created the Alive AF membership, where women like you can learn the basics on what it takes to cut back and reach your goals with alcohol, whether it is to just drink less or totally quit. And when you join, you will get the exact framework I used to change my own relationship with alcohol and still use today, that has led me to be alcohol-free for over 5 years. You're going to get access to my resources, videos, and worksheets that have been proven to change and reduce how much you drink. Every day you can ask questions, share your obstacles, and get coaching and direct support on the challenges you will face with love and no judgment. Also, you will get immediate access to workshops like uncovering your alcohol identity and changing it, how to say no to things that don't support your new identity or life or goals, aka boundaries. A workshop called Creating Emotional Agency, and another one, How to Manage Your Mind to Succeed at Your Goals, and more. Every month we have a brand new workshop. These workshops are filled with step-by-step prompts and instruction to help you create the exact relationship with alcohol that is best for you. My mission and vision for Alive AF is to be a hub of support and resources for women to come and learn how to do what is best for them and becoming more alive in the process. When you join, you're going to learn how to take care of yourself better, how to feel good and become more alive and go after the life that you really want. I want this membership to be affordable and an easy solution where you can get all the help you need in one simple place whenever you need it. So, no need to go read another book, find a new podcast, attend a free webinar, or go down the path of piecemealing it all together. Join Alive AF and have it all there in one place for you anytime you need it. So, go to angelamascenik.com/AliveAF and enrollment is open right now. See you inside.